Hello children, today I will read The Elves and the Shoemaker. There was once a kindly shoemaker who lived with his wife Clara in a room above their shop. For many years, life was good. The shoemaker worked hard and the people of the town always came to his shop when they wanted a new pair of shoes. Until the day the crafty cobbler came to town. The crafty cobbler wasn't a cobbler at all, and he certainly wasn't a craftsman. He didn't even know how to make shoes. He just bought badly made shoes from other towns and sold them very cheaply. Soon, people were flocking to his shop. They liked the look of the cheap new shoes, and they didn't know they would soon leak and fall apart. It wasn't long before the kind shoemaker found he had few customers left, very little money, and only enough leather to make one pair of shoes. "What are we going to do?" said Clara sadly. "With no shoes to sell and no customers, we'll be ruined." "I don't know," sighed the shoemaker. "I've made shoes all my life, but that crafty cobbler has taken all our business and we can't even afford to buy more leather." He was sitting hunched over his workbench as he had always done, carefully cutting out the leather pieces to make the last pair of shoes. "We'll just have to see what happens," he said wearily. "Let's go to bed. I'll finish these in the morning." The next morning, the shoemaker came down early. He hadn't slept well. He flung open the shutters, blinked in the daylight, and rubbed his eyes. Then he gave a little gasp of surprise. "What on earth? Look at this! Shoes?" he shouted. Clara came running down the stairs to see her husband staring and pointing at his bench, mouth open in amazement. There on the bench, gleaming in the early morning light, was the most perfect pair of shoes either of them had ever seen. Utterly mystified, the shoemaker picked up one of the shoes and began to examine it. "Just look at these stitches," he said. "So tiny and neat," said Clara. "And this buckle," said the shoemaker. "So shiny and bright," said Clara. "It must be magic," said the shoemaker. "They are so perfect," declared Clara. "And I bet they'll sell." She carried the magic shoes over to the empty shop window and carefully placed them on a box in the middle. Moments later, the shop door flew open and a well-dressed man strode in. "How much are those shoes in the window?" he asked. "I really must have them. They are just what I need." Within minutes, he had tried on the shoes and dropped a silver coin into the shoemaker's hand. "Keep the change," he called as he made for the door. "Maybe our luck is changing," said Clara cheerfully, closing the door behind him. With the money from the shoes, the shoemaker was able to buy enough leather to make 2 more pairs along with 4 shiny buckles. He spent the afternoon marking out the leather and cutting out the pieces, ready to start sewing the next day. But in the morning, there on the bench were 2 more pairs of perfect shoes ready to go in the window. "These are so much better than those shoddy shoes from up the road," said one of their old customers as he tried on a pair. "I bought some a month ago from the crafty cobbler and they've fallen to pieces already." "Well, you do have to pay a bit more for real craftsmanship," said the shoemaker with a little smile. With the money from selling the 2 pairs of shoes, the shoemaker could buy enough leather for 4 pairs, and once again 4 perfect pairs of shoes appeared as if by magic on his workbench overnight. And so it went on. 8 pairs, 16, 32. The shoemaker soon started cutting out patterns for fancy ladies' shoes, beautiful boots in the latest style, dainty slippers, children's sandals, and sturdy walking boots. And whatever he prepared, all the shoes and boots were always perfectly finished by the morning. Business was booming. The shop window was full each day and usually empty by nightfall. Lines of customers began to form early in the morning, with people eager to get hold of a pair of the beautiful shoes with perfect stitching. "We'll soon be rich," said Clara happily one evening, shutting the door after the final customer of the day. "I've heard the crafty cobbler is going out of business too," said the shoemaker. "Our luck really has changed. I just hope the magic holds." "Do you really think it is a magic?" said Clara. "I have no idea," said the shoemaker, "but I think it's finally time to find out." That evening, instead of going upstairs to bed, Clara and the shoemaker left a candle burning on the workbench. Then they hid behind a curtain in the workshop and waited to see what would happen. Just before midnight, the door creaked slowly open and 2 tiny figures darted across the floor and climbed up onto the workbench. "Elves!" whispered Clara. "Shh!" said the shoemaker. The couple watched in silence while the little people set to work on the huge heap of leather pieces. As their tiny needles flew in and out, the elves chatted happily in their high-pitched clickety language. For hour after hour, they worked tirelessly, stitching the shoe after shoe after shoe. They hammered on heels, stuck on soles, and fastened on buckles and bows, never once stopping to rest. "Snickety-buckety," said one elf, admiring his final shoe. "Snockety-doo," said the other, pointing to his own. Just as the sun was rising, the elves jumped down from the bench and scampered out of the door. "Mystery solved," said the shoemaker when they had gone. "But did you see the state of them?" said Clara. "Their clothes were all patched and frayed, and they had no shoes on their little feet. They must be freezing." "Poor wee things," said the shoemaker. "After all the help they've given us, I wish we could help them in some way." "I have an idea," said Clara. All that day, even though they had had no sleep, the shoemaker and his wife worked. When she wasn't serving customers, Clara stitched clothes for the elves. She made 2 tiny jackets, 2 teeny waistcoats, 2 neat little shirts, and 2 pointed elfin hats. The shoemaker, instead of cutting out leather for new shoes, made miniature elf boots from the softest leather he could find and decorated them with tiny gold buttons. "I hope they come back," said Clara. "And I hope these fit," said her husband anxiously, displaying the teeny boots on the tips of his little fingers. That night, the shoemaker and his wife left the clothes and boots on the workbench and hid behind the curtain again, waiting for the elves to appear. Just before midnight, the door creaked open. The elves scurried in and clambered quickly up onto the workbench. As soon as they saw the clothes, they started jumping up and down and squealing and laughing in delight. "Snappity, snappity, snee," squealed one. "Kickity, kackity, coo," cried the other. "I think they like them," whispered Clara, tears of happiness streaming down her cheeks. The elves wasted no time in throwing off their rags and pulling on the tiny jackets, shirts, and waistcoats. The shoemaker held his breath as they started to inspect the boots. Snickety buckety, said one, admiring the tiny stitches. Snockety doo, said the other, pointing to the gold buttons. The elves sat down to pull the boots onto their little feet. The shoemaker gave a silent sigh of relief. The boots were a perfect fit. Now the elves were dancing in delight, jigging across the workbench, jumping down to the floor, and singing at last in a language the shoemaker and his wife could understand. Now we are boys so fine to see, no longer cobblers we will be. The excited elves danced, skipped, and sang their way across the floor, out of the door, down the street, and into the night, never to be seen again. But that wasn't quite the end of the story. Even though their little helpers had gone, Clara and the shoemaker kept making and selling beautiful shoes. All their old customers returned, along with plenty of new ones, so the couple lived happily and comfortably for the rest of their lives. And what about the crafty cobbler? He was last seen leaving town one dismal day, squelching through muddy puddles and muttering miserably as his shoddy shoes let in all the water. That's all for today. Thank you for listening.